In this episode, we highlight how you can hold in your hands a mini portrait of space history. Stamps. Early in the Cold War-era space race, stamps issued by the United States Postal Service bolstered American pride in our efforts and successes against the Soviet Union. In December 1960, the Postal Service released what is considered the first space topical stamp, which depicted Echo 1 and had a 4-cent denomination. Echo 1 was the world's first communication satellite, denoted as a passive satellite.
An inflatable plastic balloon satellite, 100 feet in diameter, tall as a 10-story building, will be sent aloft folded accordion fashion inside a 26.5-inch magnesium container. The latter is mounted in the nose of a 3-stage 92-foot Thor Delta rocket. Highlighting one of the nation's proudest days in space, the satellite, called Echo 1, will serve as a reflector for radio waves that bounce back to Earth, paving the way for a new kind of worldwide communications. The rocket at Cape Canaveral carries the balloon and 30 pounds of powder, which will turn to gas and inflate it at a height above 1,000 miles.
The passive designation came from the fact that Echo 1, a balloon 100 feet in diameter and 10 stories tall and covered in a reflective polyester mylar coating, did not broadcast directly, but instead reflected radio and radar signals.
The tense moments while the rocket goes through the separation of the stages. It is only the second launching for the Thor Delta, and as shown in this animated visualization, it is living up to the expectations of the space experts who say it functions almost perfectly. With extremely precise guidance, it is placing the balloon satellite almost exactly into the desired 1,000-mile-high circular orbit. "33 minutes after launching, the balloon is released and inflated by the powder inside, which turns from a solid into gas under the sun's temperature."
Echo 1 bounced a pre-recorded message from President Dwight Eisenhower. He told the world,
And here in Washington, the chief executive listens to his own voice as it sounded when bounced from the orbiting satellite.
It is a great personal satisfaction to participate in this first experiment in communications involving the use of the satellite balloon known as Echo. This is one more significant step in the United States program of space research and exploration.
2 years later, the Postal Service issued a 4-cent stamp recognizing astronaut John Glenn's Project Mercury flight aboard Friendship 7. Launched on February 20th, 1962, this was the United States' first manned orbital mission. Glenn circled Earth 3 times, reached an altitude of 162 miles, and traveled 17,500 miles per hour.
Snorkels are open. Main chute is on green. Chute is out in reef condition at 10,800 feet and beautiful chute. Hello, Mercury Recovery. This is Friendship 7. Do you receive? Friendship 7, this is Steeland. Be advised, I have you officially. Roger. What is your estimate on recovery time? Over. Estimate pickup now at 20 minutes. Over. Landing bag is on green. Friendship 7 ready for impact. Almost down. Here we go. Okay, does the capsule look like it's okay? Over. The capsule looks good from here. Over.
Home to Earth comes the Voyager.
Glenn's harrowing re-entry through the atmosphere, grappling with what was later determined to be a faulty sensor indicating his heat shield might detach, but fortunately did not, proved his mettle and expertise as an astronaut pilot. In Americans' eyes, he was a hero. With space fervor now sweeping the nation, it's no surprise that space stamp clubs sprang up. Their enthusiastic members created special postal covers and cancellations. Aboard the recovery ships that retrieved astronauts, sailors helped to hand-cancel such covers and stamps. In October 1964, a special airmail stamp with an 8-cent denomination commemorated Robert Goddard's early work in rocketry. The first American to walk in space, Edward White II, was depicted on 2 5-cent stamps released in September 1967. The left stamp showed White, and the Wright stamped the Gemini capsule from which he emerged for his historic activity on June 3, 1965. White was subsequently assigned to the Apollo mission. He lost his life at just age 36 on January 27, 1967, during the devastating Apollo 1 fire. The blaze also killed Gus Grissom and Roger Chaffee. Astronaut William Anders' famous Earthrise photograph, taken aboard Apollo 8, was on a 6-cent stamp postmarked May 5, 1969. This commemorated the first time man had watched, with his own eyes, the planet Earth rise over the lunar landscape. The words, "In the beginning, God," recalled the astronauts' December 1968 Christmas Eve reading from the Bible's first book, Genesis.
Back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness.
The Apollo 11 lunar mission, the first to carry astronauts to walk on the moon, has been commemorated many times in the 50 years since the historic event. One bit of cargo that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin carried to the surface was the die for the 10-cent stamp First Man on the Moon. This stamp was released shortly afterward in September. In the mid-1970s, the United States Postal Service depicted post-lunar missions that included Skylab, along with such probes as Mariner, Pioneer, and Viking. The July 1975 two-stamp issue for the Apollo-Soyuz test project was co-designed by the United States and Soviet Union artists. The American issue was in English, with the USSR release in Cyrillic. The year 1994 marked a quarter century since Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin first walked on the moon. 500,000 of these anniversary stamps were carried aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour. Perhaps the most controversial space-themed stamp was on the 400 postal covers the Apollo 15 crew surreptitiously carried to the moon in 1972. Done without NASA's knowledge or approval, the astronauts, according to NASA, had entered into a financial agreement with a stamp dealer to carry them. When the story came out, the agency and the Congress were outraged. Investigations ensued. Today, the covers each sell for thousands of dollars. Long before the USPS commemorated NASA's achievements, however, similar themes on stamps were already common worldwide. A 6-part series that Sky and Telescope magazine published in the first half of 1959 featured numerous examples. Italy released 4 in 1942 with astronomer Galileo Galilei's image. In 1953, Austria honored Johannes Kepler, and the same year, Poland recognized Nicholas Copernicus. France depicted Copernicus and Sir Isaac Newton in 1957. Many nations touted their own observatories. Sky and Telescope's examples include Korea depicting its 1,300-year-old astronomical observing tower, and the Japanese issue showed the Mizusawa Latitude Observatory. In 1948, the United States had commemorated the Palomar Mountain Observatory on a 3-cent stamp. Constellations such as the Big and Little Dippers were on a 1933 airmail stamp of the former Cyrenaica, which had been an Italian colony, Sky and Telescope noted in April 1959. Cuba depicted the Star of Bethlehem and the Crux, and Australia, Brazil, and New Zealand the Southern Cross. These two 1942 Mexico stamps showed photographs of the Sombrero Galaxy. In 1958, the U.S., France, and Hungary commemorated the International Geophysical Year, June 1957 through December 1958, which in the United States led to the launching of the Explorer and Vanguard satellites. The next year, Russian and Romanian stamps showed the Soviet Mekta space probe, later known as Luna 1. Ironically, the probe missed the moon and ended up orbiting the sun.